What is still canon from the old DCEU? Will the Council of Dooms be in Avengers Doomsday? And who is that top secret cameo in Peacemaker Season 2? Those are the burning questions that I have selected for this week's edition of Ask Colton. Hey everybody, Colton here, and this is the mailbag style show where I take your questions about Marvel, Star Wars, DC, movies and streaming in general. Whatever you want to ask, send it into the email address AskColtonNow@gmail.com, link in the description below. And hey, maybe you'll see your question featured right here on the show. Alright, our first question comes to us from Eric Lawson. Eric writes, "Hey Colton, I am still unclear on what's canon to James Gunn's DC universe. I thought just Superman, Creature Commandos, and the new season of Peacemaker were canon, but Peacemaker Season 2 is referencing a lot of stuff from the Suicide Squad. Is that movie canon now too? And if it's canon, doesn't that mean that other DCEU movies would be canon too?" Alright, well thank you so much for that question, Eric. So, the DCU's canon may seem a little overwhelming, but I promise it's not as complicated as some are making it out to be. It's actually pretty straightforward. And super quick, if anyone doesn't know, canon just means the official history of the universe in which the show you're watching or the movie you're watching takes place in. Okay, so we know there's the old DCEU that started with Man of Steel and then had Batman v Superman and Justice League, Aquaman, Shazam, Black Adam, all that stuff. Those are all projects and characters that were in that old DC movie universe, which was called the DCEU. But now we have a brand new Superman who is completely separate from all of that, and he exists within his own new cinematic universe called the DCU. The official 100% canon projects of the DCU so far are Superman, Creature Commandos, and Peacemaker Season 2. For example, Jason Momoa is no longer Aquaman in this universe, but instead he's playing the space biker Lobo. We're also getting a new Wonder Woman, a new Supergirl, probably a new Batman, or they'll bring over Robert Pattinson's Batman. That still remains to be seen. Currently, Pattinson exists in what's called the Reevesverse, which is separate from the DCEU and the DCU. It's its own thing. So yes, there is a new DC universe, and the 100% canon projects that we have gotten so far for that universe are Creature Commandos, Superman, and Peacemaker Season 2. But there's still quite a bit from that old DCEU that is still canon to the new DCU. And no, I don't mean multiverse shit and like the timelines were rewritten or it's some parallel universe and they share like one DC multiverse that makes everything still kind of canon. That's not what I'm talking about. We're just talking a good old-fashioned that movie doesn't count type of retcon, kind of like what they're doing with the new Alien movies. They ignore Alien 3, they ignore Alien Resurrection, they ignore Alien versus Predator. Those movies are retcon, they don't count.
Doesn't count.
So let's run down what is and isn't canon from the old DCEU in this new DCU. Creature Commandos, canon. Superman, canon. Peacemaker Season 2, canon. The upcoming Supergirl, Clayface, Lanterns, and Man of Tomorrow, all canon. There's also the Batman Part 2, which I don't know if it's going to be DCU canon. James Gunn has, as of right now, stated that it's an Elseworlds thing, that Matt Reeves' movies, his Batman movies, take place outside of the DCU, but who knows what they're doing. Maybe James Gunn is still considering making those canon to the DCU. We'll just have to see. Now, the Snyder trilogy and The Flash and Aquaman and Wonder Woman and all of those from that previous era of DC, those are all not canon. They didn't happen. What occurred in those films is not part of the history of the new universe. So you have your canon, you have your definitely not canon, and then you have your somewhat canon. Peacemaker Season 1, it's somewhat canon. In fact, it's mostly canon, but there are a few things here and there that occurred in Season 1, such as that Justice League cameo, that aren't canon. So Peacemaker Season 1, mostly canon. The Suicide Squad, which James Gunn also did, mostly canon. Blue Beetle, which James Gunn had nothing to do with, but hey, it's a good movie, it's a new character, he didn't have a lot of involvement with that DCEU, and he can fit nicely into the DCU, so mostly canon. Hell, even that first Suicide Squad movie is mostly canon. Now, typically something is either canon or it's not canon. I used to kind of balk at the idea of something being mostly canon. I'd be kind of a snob about it and be like, no, it's either canon or it's not. But if you think about it, there is some nuance to it. You can say, hey, that part of the story, that's actually true. That happened in the history of this world. That part from that story, that's not true. That was made up. That's kind of how you can view it. For example, Ben Affleck's Batman is in that Suicide Squad movie. So that part of Suicide Squad is not canon. Hell, maybe even the scenes that Batman is in are still canon, to the extent that, for example, we saw Batman chase down a car with Harley Quinn in it being driven by the Joker that crashes into the water. But in the DCU, even if that scene is part of the history, we know that that particular Batman was not the Ben Affleck version of Batman. And I don't just mean, oh, he doesn't look like Ben Affleck. No, you can do a simple recasting. But I'm saying that the character of Batman, that particular version of Batman that Ben Affleck played, and the history that we learned about with that version of Batman, and his, entanglement with his various villains and with Superman, none of that is canon. All that would be considered canon is perhaps that, oh, at one point in history, Harley was in a car being driven by the Joker and they were chased by Batman. And then we can learn, yeah, that happened, but it wasn't Affleck's Batman. It wasn't Jared Leto's Joker. But what is canon is Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn and characters like Rick Flag and Amanda Waller. And most of their actions in that movie are part of this DCU history. So for example, in the DCU, Viola Davis's Amanda Waller does run Task Force X just like she did in the DCEU. And she has likely met characters like Batman and Superman, just not the Henry Cavill or Ben Affleck versions of those characters. Now, Peacemaker Season 1, which originally took place in the DCEU, it is still 99% canon to the new DCU. Gunn has just simply stated that things like that Justice League cameo aren't canon, and we've even seen them actually change that in the Previously On section for the premiere of Season 2, where they were swapped out with the Justice Gang. And James Gunn has also come out and said that little quips that Peacemaker made about Aquaman in Season 1, those are likely not canon as well. Reason being that at this point in the DCU, the character of Aquaman isn't known by the public. And I have to say, I appreciate the nonchalantness of his explanation of canon, and that's coming from me who, like I said, I'm a self-admitted canon snob. I hate when movies and shows break canon, but this situation, it's different. Gunn is kickstarting a brand new universe with its own established canon that he plans to shepherd and keep consistent from this point forward. But he's also not going to rob himself and the fans of having Peacemaker in the gang and Blue Beetle and Amanda Waller and even members of the Suicide Squad getting to remain canon. Gunn is not instituting this arbitrary rule and forcing himself to get rid of amazing pieces of story and great cast from that old universe. There's even a great scene in the most recent episode of Peacemaker 203 that confirms that Enchantress, aka June Moon, from that first Suicide Squad movie is canon to the DCU. So basically the short of it is that you can view that old DCEU as a vague, loose history to the new DCU. So I hope that explains it for you, and hopefully as this new DCU moves forward, we'll get a clearer understanding of what specifically is canon and what isn't in this new universe, and we can have a better understanding of the precise canon that isn't quite as fluid as it currently is in this early stage. All right, thanks so much for the question. Our next one is an Avengers Doomsday related question, my favorite. And this one comes to us from Nicholas Sloan. Colton, you have talked a lot on ScreenCrush and on your channel about the Council of Kangs being replaced by the Council of Dooms. Would Tony Starks also be, would Tony Starks, like multiple, okay. Would they also be on the Council of Dooms if they are variants and variants of Doom? Okay, all right, love that question. Yes, I do think we could see a multiversal council of Doctor Dooms in Doomsday. Let me explain. So a year ago, Marvel revealed Robert Downey Jr. would be playing Doctor Doom, but they revealed something else huge that night, and we all missed it. We know Kang is out and Doom is in, and what was once Avengers the Kang Dynasty is now Avengers Doomsday. Now, Kang Dynasty was a film that would feature many different variant versions of Kang, which we met in Quantumania, and they'd be fighting against the Avengers as the mainline MCU, the Sacred Timeline, began to touch the multiverse, their multiverse, following the death of He Who Remains at the end of Loki. So with Kang out and Doctor Doom in, the question becomes, can one Doctor Doom really replace a whole Council of Kangs as a villain? And yes, from a power perspective, of course, Doom can definitely replace a whole Council of Kangs. But if Avengers 5, back when it was the Kang Dynasty, if it was structured to have multiple Kangs fighting multiple groups of heroes, and if that same story, for the most part, is remaining the same, but it's going to be happening with Doom instead of Kang, then I do understand the question of how can one Doom fill in for all of these Kangs who were going to be in multiple universes at the same time, fighting the Avengers and I guess the X-Men and the Fantastic Four in all these different areas, something that we've seen them do really well in Infinity War by having different groups of heroes in different spots fighting different villains. The simple answer from the comics is that he would have his Doombots, but for the movies, I think we're going to see a very different kind of Doombot. With Doom and Iron Man being variants in the MCU, it kind of writes itself and would be super poetic for Doom to have his Doombots like Tony had his Iron Legion, but this is the multiverse saga, and I'm actually expecting a full-on council of multiversal variants of Doctor Doom. But unlike the Council of Kangs, I think the members of the Council of Dooms will be very similar to Doombots in the sense that they share one consciousness and they all answer to one prime Doctor Doom. And hey, by the way, speaking of Doom, be sure to check out our Iron Man and Doctor Doom pointing meme shirt, link in the description below. Now, I want to be clear, this isn't just some crazy Colton theory. I think Kevin Feige and the Russos revealed that the Council of Dooms would be a big part of this movie at Comic-Con. Before RDJ took the stage to reveal himself as Doctor Doom, the stage was first filled by many other green-cloaked, metal-masked Dooms. Why? Well, some would say it was just a fun creative presentation choice, and some would say maybe it was teasing, like just actual Doombots. But I think there might have been something more, because you could have just as easily had RDJ come out on his own in that Doctor Doom getup, take off his mask, reveal, oh, it's me, RDJ, I'm playing Doctor Doom. The crowd would have went just as wild. What I think truly inspired them to have a stage full of Dooms was the fact that the story of Doomsday, which was once the story of Kang Dynasty, is still going to feature a villainous council. In the comics, we've had the Council of Kangs as well as the Council of Reeds. And in both instances, the councils were created by the sheer fact that across the multiverse, variants of Kang all discovered time travel, as well as the existence of parallel stacked universes, thus discovering each other and forming their council. And the same was true for the Council of Reeds. Reeds that were brilliant enough to build a multiversal bridge and discover the multiverse, they were able to then join the Multiversal Council as a sort of rite of passage. So if time travel and discovery of the multiverse and technological savvy and being a super genius are all major pillars of having a multiversal council of a character, then which characters come to mind? Tony Stark and Doctor Doom. In the comics, Doctor Doom is one of the first to discover time travel, and in the MCU, Tony Stark is the guy who discovers time travel. So it would make total sense if this guy that we know as Tony, but in some universes is Victor Von Doom, it would make total sense that there would be a council of these variants. Now, is it called the Council of Dooms? Is it called the Council of Starks? The Council of Genius, Billionaire, Playboy, Philanthropist? Who knows? But it would be totally comic book and movie accurate to have a Council of Dooms who don't necessarily share a name or a backstory with each other. I mean, the Council of Kangs, it is made up of very different versions of Kang that have different life stories and even different names and never actually went by the name Kang. We've got Immortus, Rama-Tut, the Centurion, and so on. Now, something we've talked a lot about here on the channel is how and why Doctor Doom looks like Tony Stark and has to be played by RDJ. My favorite theory is that they are variants of one another, and in some universes, this guy is Dr. Victor Von Doom, and in other universes, he's Tony Stark Iron Man. And my favorite part of that theory is that in universes where he's Tony Stark, it's due to him being adopted by the Starks when he was a baby. And instead of growing up in Latveria as Victor, he grows up in the States as Tony. Now, a really fun addition to this theory, which plays into the Council of Doom's angle, is the idea of dreamwalking. We are introduced to dreamwalking in the Multiverse of Madness, the ability for you to transfer your consciousness into the body of your multiversal self, even your dead selves. Imagine a scenario where there is one Prime Doom, the God Emperor Doom, and he is using his multiversal selves, both Tony Stark's and Doctor Doom's, across the multiverse as his Doombot puppets. And in the 616 universe, he may even take over the dead body of 616 Tony Stark, who also has that gnarly face scar from the snap, just like Doom has that gnarly face scar in the comics. So what I'm saying is I'm not expecting a Council of Dooms that work together as equals, and us seeing Robert Downey Jr. play like a bunch of different versions of the character, kind of like what Jonathan Majors was doing with the different versions of Kang. I think we're going to have one primary Doom, and the rest are going to kind of just be like servants. I'm expecting a Council of Dooms that aren't kneeling before a Doom, because that's very not Doom, but instead they're essentially being controlled, like mind controlled by a primary Doom. Perhaps a God Emperor level Doom, who is the Doom that we will be seeing at the end of Doomsday and in Secret Wars, and who could be controlling them all from like this undisclosed location, perhaps even from Loki's throne. And what would be super cool is if how they defeat Doom is by them like breaking this spell and the other Dooms being pissed that this Doom was mind controlling all of them, and then they all, just like pile on Doom and take him out. And I just also wanted to add that the idea of Doombots is yet another reason that having Doom and Tony be variants is such a cool idea, because Tony Stark's own invention, Ultron, who basically was the evil version of Tony Stark that we're probably going to see Doom sort of kind of be. Ultron had bots at his disposal as well, but not bots that had their own like autonomy. Ultron's consciousness was present in each of those bots, and despite the destruction of his main body or any of their bodies, his consciousness was always still online until Vision shut him out. So if they end up doing this with Doom, this would make it to where no matter how many Dooms the Avengers and the X-Men and everyone are able to defeat, the true Doom is still safe and hidden away somewhere in the multiverse. And yes, this Prime Doom who's hidden away somewhere, he too would be RDJ. I don't want to hear this nonsense about the real Doom being played by a different actor. However, I guess that would be a pretty creative way to introduce a new actor as Doom for the post-Secret Wars era if they wanted to. And we have seen established in Agatha all along that consciousnesses without physical forms can travel into other bodies. When Wanda's two boys, Billy and Tommy, were without physical bodies and their souls were lingering, they were able to enter the bodies of temporarily dead individuals, almost as if they were reviving them. And I do love the idea of God Emperor Doom being a Doom without a physical body, and a Doom who is perhaps in his astral form, and maybe even the only survivor of his dead universe, and he was only able to survive because he separated from his physical body using his knowledge of the mystic arts. And this would be another awesome way for Doom to travel universe to universe, taking over the various Tony and Victor bodies around the multiverse and using them as his Doombots and using them as his multiversal Council of Dooms. But hey, those are just my thoughts and theories. I would love to hear yours down in the comments below. Thank you so much for that question, Eric. All right. Next, we've got a question from Kyle Granger. Kyle simply wants to know, when can we expect the first Avengers Doomsday trailer? All right, so I do think I know when we can expect our first teaser for Doomsday and what it'll look like, as well as the first, second, and third full trailers as well. So Doomsday is in the midst of shooting right now, and it is set to hit theaters in December of 2026, so a little over a year away. And many are, of course, wondering when we're finally going to get our first glimpse of what the Russo brothers and Kevin Feige and RDJ are cooking for this fifth installment of the biggest movie franchise of all time, the Avengers. Well, I think I know what we can expect from this first teaser and then for the first trailer. Now, so far all we've gotten is a few behind the scenes set photos and videos, some official, some not so official, but they've honestly done a surprisingly great job, I would say, at keeping this movie on lockdown when it comes to leaks. So we're of course all itching for that first teaser, but so far all we've gotten is the big cherry video where we got a portion of the cast announced, and we're still waiting for that second big casting announcement of characters such as Spider-Man, Deadpool, Wolverine, and more. Will it be chairs? Maybe couches, futons? futon watch. So the typical release schedule for blockbuster level trailers, meaning, big films like Doomsday, is we get a teaser about a year out, and then the first official trailer about 6 months out. Now, keep in mind, a teaser, that is a shorter and more vague tease for the film, whereas a full trailer shares more of the story and, of course, more footage. So assuming the film's release date doesn't change again and move to May of 2027, this is when I think we can expect to see the first Doomsday teaser. Christmas. The first teaser for Doomsday should drop on December 18th, exactly 1 year prior to Doomsday's release, and alongside the premiere of Disney's 2025 December blockbuster, Avatar: Fire and Ash. It's very common for a studio to release the first teaser or the first trailer for one of their big movies alongside the release of another one of their big movies. Now, I'm not saying they're going to keep the teaser exclusive to theaters and playing in front of Fire and Ash. They're going to drop it online too, because if they don't, there's just going to be a shit ton of cell phone videos uploaded of the trailer to YouTube and shit, and then I'll of course cover it as you would expect. But I think that would kind of undercut the whole big trailer drop, or big teaser drop. So they're just going to drop the teaser, I would think, as well, that same night, or at least the next morning. And I remember 10 years ago, I think, that the first trailer for Avengers Age of Ultron, it was supposed to drop during the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., one of the episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But the trailer ended up leaking, so Marvel just went ahead and dropped the trailer a day early, because they didn't want everybody's first look at the movie to be this leaked copy. That they wanted to have the first official copy out there, and for that to get the buzz, because there was going to be buzz one way or the other, so they'd rather it be through official channels. So, December, that's when we can expect our first teaser, which will likely be similar to that quasi-teaser we got just recently at D23, which featured lines from various heroes in their other films, and this montage teasing them all coming together, just like they did for Infinity War. But I think the teaser will end in all likelihood with a brand new line from RDJ as Doom. I seriously doubt they show his face in the teaser. They're probably just going to show him in the mask, but full frontal. Okay. Instead of that behind the hood shot with him holding the mask, they'll probably show him in the hood with the mask and looking up and saying something sinister. And I'm not even certain that they're going to actually show RDJ's face in any of the marketing, because, Doom, he so rarely takes off his mask in the comics, and that's a big part of his character, but not showing it. I've heard some suggest, my great friend, my boss, my good friend, Ryan Airy, I love him to death, but he has said it would be awesome if they just didn't even show his face at all. You don't bring in a Robert Downey Jr. to play Doom and then not show his face at all in the movie. And I really don't think you do it for the trailer either. I think that's a little bit of a missed opportunity to not show the face of your biggest draw in any of your marketing. I'm also of the opinion, especially with it having leaked, the Andrew and Toby being in No Way Home, they should have just put them in the damn trailers, if you ask me. As far as the first official trailer goes, beyond that of a teaser, you shouldn't expect that until around June of 2026, 6 months out from the release of the film. For a long time, movies, especially these big movies, they started doing this thing where they would drop trailers more than 6 months out from the release of the film, and that's just a waste of money for almost any movie. And I get doing a teaser type thing that early for a Marvel, DC, or Star Wars movie, especially if you want to show something at a fan event. In fact, speaking of fan events, I do think it would be better if they saved the first trailer for a little closer to the movie in July of 2026 at San Diego Comic-Con, or push it even a little closer to the movie and have it in August at D23. Because, guys, the point of a trailer is to advertise the movie. And when you start advertising it too early, the money you spent on that very expensive marketing becomes for naught, because it was too far out from the actual release. So 6 months really is the absolute earliest you should be releasing these trailers. And then as for trailers 2 and 3, those really shouldn't be dropping, I would say, at the soonest, the 3-month out mark. I think if you have a second trailer released when the movie is still more than 3 months out, oh my God, no, you ramp it up, and it's a sharp incline. You tease a little, maybe then you have the first trailer, and then you wait till you're right up at the release of the movie to really start putting stuff out and putting out TV spots. And God, they put out way too many TV spots, but don't get me started on that. Anyway, again, the point of these trailers is to market the movie and get people pumped and planning to go see the film. And when the marketing campaign and its budget are stretched out over too long of a span of time, they become far less effective than they could and would be if you save the bulk of the campaign for those 3, or I'd say really even 2 months before release. So there's my long roundabout way of my prediction that I think you can pretty safely take to the bank that we will get our first teaser for Doomsday in December, and then our first trailer in June. All right, thanks so much for the question. Next up, we have a question from Marcus Hale, and this one kind of connects to what we just talked about a little bit earlier in the episode with DCU Canon. Dear Colton, that is how you start a question. Dear Colton, I like that. Thank you, Marcus. Dear Colton, thank you for choosing my question. You are very welcome. James Gunn has said that there will be a big cameo in Peacemaker Season 2. Who do you think it will be? I think it will be Jason Momoa as Lobo. All right. Okay. Thank you so much for that question, and having such nice question asking etiquette, unlike some of these other fuckers. Just kidding. So yeah, Gunn did come out and say that there would be a big cameo, and that's honestly a great guess about it being Momoa as Lobo. I like that because last season, Peacemaker Season 1, the big cameo, one of the big cameos was Jason Momoa as Aquaman. So there'd be something, poetic about having Momoa as Lobo make a cameo and set up the next DCU project, which is Supergirl, in which Lobo is the villain. So that's a great guess. But I'll throw another one out there. Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn. So when James Gunn revealed that Peacemaker Season 2 would have a huge cameo reminiscent of the Justice League cameo in the first season, many began to speculate on who it could be. For a long time, I thought we could safely assume it would be Corn Sweat Superman. I mean, Peacemaker cameoed in Superman after all. And it still may be Corn Sweat Superman, because Gunn has said that we can expect to see Superman again before Superman Man of Tomorrow. But I think the most likely place for us to see Superman again is probably in Supergirl, and hell, we might see him in several projects before Man of Tomorrow. We could definitely see him in Supergirl and Peacemaker and Lanterns and whatever else. Maybe not Clayface. Maybe Superman's not Clayface. So if it's not Superman, who could it be? Now, when trying to figure out who this cameo could be, there's also that multiverse angle to the show that we need to keep in mind, with the quantum unfolding chamber doors to 99 other realities. The cameo could be us seeing one of these doors swing open, and hell, Ben Affleck's Batman could be standing there as a gag. Cavill's Superman, Momoa could be Momoa, but back as Aquaman. But my guess, and this guess is based on a direct quote from James Gunn, my guess is Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn. Robbie's Harley was arguably the best part of that old DCEU. And in Gunn's version of the Suicide Squad, I'd say she was also like one of the best parts of that movie. And, it's really a shame that she hasn't been given more of a chance to shine. But there's still hope, because Robbie's Harley, I think, in fact, I will say I know, will be the new DCU Harley Quinn. James Gunn was recently asked about Robbie returning to the role, which he simply said, quote, "That will be revealed down the line." And I think this was totally him not wanting to spoil the cameo for Peacemaker. But beyond it potentially being a spoiler for him to confirm that she'd be back, there could be several other reasons that he's not quite ready to confirm it, because maybe he still needs to talk to Margot about whether or not she wants to commit to being the Harley of the new DCU for the next at least 10 years, because if he's going to have to recast the character within the next 10 years, then it's really now would be the time to just go ahead and do it. And if he did have to recast the character right now, he could still say, yeah, there's a new actress playing Harley in the DCU, but the story of Margot Robbie's version of the character is still largely considered canon, and they've just simply decided to recast the role. It's really not as complicated as everyone's making it out to be. But something tells me that if Gunn can get Robbie to agree, I think he'd be delighted to have her. The best part about James Gunn being willing to make pieces of that old DCEU canon part of the new DCU canon is that he can keep around great casting choices from that old era, like Viola Davis as Amanda Waller, and of course Rick Flag, and we've got Peacemaker, and it doesn't have to be this like multiverse bullshit, and her Harley doesn't need to like come through one of those multiversal doors. In the most recent episode of Peacemaker 203, a good chunk of the first Suicide Squad movie where Robbie's Harley debuted, it was made canon to the DCU. I'm of course referring to the confirmation that Rick Flag of the DCU also dated June the Enchantress, and so that's all being brought over into the new DCU. So we already knew that the overwhelming majority of James Gunn's The Suicide Squad was considered canon to the new DCU. After all, that's where we first met Peacemaker. But now that the first installment, the first Suicide Squad, the third ever DCEU film, it is now largely considered canon as well, and that's huge. And here's the thing, Peacemaker, it is a gnarly show, very adult, very foul, and I love it. And Harley Quinn, Robbie's version of Harley Quinn, perfect character to show up for a cameo because she would exist in that corner, the Peacemaker, Suicide Squad, Creature Commandos corner of the DCU. Hell, that animated Harley Quinn show is dirty as fuck, and it's great. So that's really what DC has been doing with Harley Quinn. They're making her more of an adult character and having her be kind of like a Deadpool-esque character in terms of, Marvel is very kid-friendly, but they also have, their Deadpool-type characters. So I think that Margot's Harley is definitely in that Peacemaker vigilante realm of the DCU more so than she is in the Superman realm. And really, she has become such a big character in her own right as part of this DC pantheon that she doesn't even have to be in that Batman wing where perhaps you would have expected her to be like 15 years ago. But then that all brings into question the Joker of it all. Now, despite Suicide Squad having large pieces of it now being canon, probably even the scenes with Harley and Joker and Batman, it won't have been Ben Affleck's Batman, and it won't have been Jared Leto's Joker, who are still like, there's no way in hell they're reopening that can of worms, and I expect that we will get a whole new Joker for the DCU, one who will likely have had a new history, I guess, with Harley that we'll learn about. But like Harley says in Birds of Prey, they broke up. So really, they might not even have to have Joker and Harley all that connected. Where it would get dicey is if they canonize Pattinson's Batman and therefore his Barry Keoghan Joker. I don't know that this Harley and that Joker really pair well, but hey, maybe I'm wrong. Especially, if they don't pair well, we know they're broken up. Maybe that's why they don't pair well. So that could work. Maybe we'll just have to see. But I'm personally still leaning toward my preference, and what I'm hoping for is that Gunn won't just allow Matt Reeves to complete his trilogy, but be, insistent that he completed in a timely manner, and then bring in the DCU Batman and the DCU Joker and have them be this like fresh new characters of the DCU crafted by Gunn and other creatives that he has on his team. And then you can just have Harley's vague history with Batman and Joker be part of their history. Like, we can have it be the Margot Robbie Harley, and a lot of what we've seen her do still be canon, except for her involvement with that specific Joker and that specific Batman. I hope that makes sense. Now, The Suicide Squad, it might be my favorite DCEU movie. Hell, it might be my favorite DC movie. And I'm not quite ready to say that. I'd have to think on it. But because that movie came out like during the pandemic, and it was also released on streaming like at the exact same time as it was in theaters, I don't think it ever really got the flowers that it deserved. So I really hope that James Gunn will make a sequel soon in the new DCU and put Margot Robbie front and center and help bring back King Shark and Waller and Peacemaker and Idris Elba and the Rat Girl and some new characters or some of the Creature Commandos. I want Weasel to be part of it, or Phosphorus. That would be cool. It'd be great. So that's my argument for the cameo totally being Margot Robbie's Harley, and for her being the DCU Harley Quinn for years to come. And she's got a pretty great working relationship as well with Warner Brothers, especially after Barbie and its success. So I could even see her wanting to have like a producer role and like a creative role in terms of Harley's stories moving forward, which I think is important because if Gunn is going to be the CEO of DC Studios, and he's going to be running this thing like from the creative perspective, and then we have Safran doing the more like business side of the business. If Gunn's going to do that and be like the Kevin Feige, but he's also going to write and direct movies himself, something that Feige is not doing, then Gunn is really going to benefit from having other people that he can trust to say, hey, you shepherd this corner. I'm shepherding the Superman corner, and I'm also going to shepherd all of the DCU. But since my main focus is here, I'm going to give a vague what needs to happen here. And you, my trusted creatives, who I know will put out a good script and a good quality product, you take the ball and run with it. And I, James Gunn, will approve. I'll read the script and I'm not going to greenlight anything without my approval. But he doesn't have to be the sole creative force, is essentially what I'm saying. So those are just my thoughts and theories. I would love to hear yours down in the comments below. Take it to the bank, I think. Margot Robbie, definitely going to be the DCU Harley. And I think could be the Peacemaker cameo, but we'll just have to see. All right, guys. Well, those were our main topic questions that were sent into the email address, the AskColtonNow@gmail.com. But I also wanted to pull some questions that we got from Twitter and the YouTube comment section. So this one comes to us from Josue Roberto. Am I the only one who's really uncomfortable with the title Avengers Doomsday? The word Doomsday makes me think of the death of Superman. The death of Superman, the comic. Okay. And it's been really hard for me to make the switch at a subconscious level. Yeah, I mean, I get that. It's kind of reminiscent of how there's an apocalypse character in Marvel. And then there's also Darkseid in DC, whose home planet is Apocalypse. Granted, it's spelled different. But those are already like two similar characters. And then you have one being called Apocalypse and one being from Apocalypse. So I get what you're saying there. Here's the thing. Words like apocalypse and doomsday, those are words that are difficult for Marvel or DC to really copyright. I mean, sure, when it comes to naming a character, they can't like both get away with naming a character Doomsday or naming a character Apocalypse. But for example, with Apocalypse, one naming a place Apocalypse and one naming a character Apocalypse, that's kind of in the same vein, I would think, as DC having a character named Doomsday, but Marvel having a movie named Doomsday. And, Doomsday, that's a title that they've used before in the comics, so I don't really have a problem with it, and I haven't found myself being unable to, like, differentiate between the two, because the Doomsday title, it's largely inspired, it's solely inspired, really, by, yes, the story of that movie likely being about the end of the multiverse, but also with Doctor Doom being the villain. And Doctor Doom is a character who, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure Doom is a far older character than the character of Doomsday. So I don't see too much of an issue there, but I get how it can cause definitely some cross wires in the mind if you're a fan of both. So yeah. All right. Thank you so much for that question. Next question comes to us from Jonathan. What do you think studios can do to combat franchise or even genre fatigue? Ooh. Great question. Okay, that's reminiscent of a question that I've gotten a lot on tour about superhero fatigue or multiverse fatigue. I've always been of the opinion that there's no such thing as superhero fatigue or multiverse fatigue. There's just bad movie fatigue or even subpar movie fatigue. Yes, I understand that the superhero movie and the multiverse movie formula, it can get a little repetitive, especially, God, it just feels like multiverse. Everybody started, even beyond Marvel and DC, just everybody started playing with the idea of the multiverse. And I could go on for a while about that, about our society being in this state where we're like longing for alternate realities where horrible things like the pandemic didn't happen. So I think that's kind of in our cultural zeitgeist right now. But I do think that audiences, to get back to your question, I think they're more open to like having more superhero movies and having more multiverse movies if the studios and the creatives behind each specific movie give audiences something really fucking good. I mean, do you know how many, like, I don't know, what are they called? Murder mystery movies, or cop movies, or ghost movies, or road trip movies, etc. that there have been. And that's going even more specific than genre. I mean, the sheer number of just comedies or action flicks or horror films that are produced every single year, it's a lot. But you never hear people really like saying, oh, I'm so tired of horror movies, or I'm so tired of comedies, or I'm tired of action movies. No, they get tired of being force-fed slop by low-effort forces that just pump shit out and expect us to go watch it. They get tired of comedies that aren't funny, or scary movies that aren't scary and are just bad. So the way studios can like stave off any type of fatigue or disinterest that moviegoers may have, it isn't to say, oh, well, we need to create a whole new genre, or just stop making movies in this specific genre. No, you just need to make good movies. And I know that's way easier said than done as a guy who's made some pretty shit movies. But these blockbuster level movies, they have no excuse for being bad, in my opinion. They have all the money in the world to throw at these movies. So there's no excuse for not having the best of the best come in and give audiences quality content that makes them want to come back to the movies. Like, when I see big blockbusters bring in either no-name people, which I am a huge supporter of giving people their first movies. You know, for you to get a Spielberg, even Spielberg had to have his first movie. Every great writer and great director and great cinematographer, they all had to have their first movie. But when I see big blockbusters giving people their first script, or their first this, or their first that, no, that's not what you need to do. You need to let them cut their teeth on something else and learn the craft and then work up to that. And especially, you know, having like essentially movie making virgins make Hollywood blockbusters is a little more rare, but something they do, they have people who have not done some good stuff, like who have written some shitty scripts or directed some shitty stuff, and they still give them the job to come do their blockbuster. And I just do not get that. And, you know, it's crazy that smaller movies with like 50 million and under budgets, they tend to be way better than the giant $200 million budget movies. When smaller movies are on like way tighter deadlines and have to pinch every penny, you would think that the blockbuster would be better in every way. And it's usually not. And something that I've argued is actually that perhaps having the smaller budget is a good thing, because it forces you to make the best decision possible for your movie, instead of just throwing everything you have against the wall because you can and hoping it comes together well in the cut and when in post-production. But hey, what do I know? Thanks for the question, man. But that's my answer. It's not the genre. It's not the specific kind of movie. It's making it well. And I was going to say making it different than what you've seen, something we've seen before, and that's important. But man, even if you do make something that is something we have seen a million times before, if it's good, it's good. So that's just always has to be your primary thing. And I know that's really a simple answer and easier said than done. But before you go like thinking, oh, well, we have to make this kind of movie or this kind of movie, or ignore this genre or embrace that genre, their main focus has to be putting the time, effort, and attention into actually putting out good product, instead of just putting out product and saying, hey, these dumb fucks, if we can cut together a good trailer, they'll all come see it opening weekend and we'll get our money back. And who cares if they like it after that? Well, that's stupid, because when you do that too many times, people are going to stop coming to opening weekend despite how good the trailer looked. All right, guys. Well, my voice is about gone, and I have work tomorrow. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off for tonight. There were some more great questions that I actually pulled from Twitter in the comment section that I will answer in next week's episode of the show. So thank you all so much for watching. Let me know. This is our first episode of Ask Colton. It's where I pull you guys questions in to talk about what you want to talk about. And sometimes, you know, there's stuff I want to talk about that maybe doesn't, you know, make for a good, like, like scripted, like ScreenCrush video that maybe I just want to run my mouth about. And so if I see a question that gives me an excuse to talk about something I've been itching to talk about, that's awesome. So think about that when you're sending in questions. If you're kind of a follower of mine and you know, I know Colton likes to run his mouth about that, that might increase your chances of having your question selected. All right. Thank you so much for watching. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified every time we upload a new video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.
You're still here. It's over. Go home.